There is no gentle way to put it, if we are to speak truthfully. Homosexuality and gender dysphoria are abnormalities. And yet, despite these two phenomena apparently belong in the so-called allied and inclusive LGBTQ+ community, they could not be more different. After all, if you can't decide what sex you are attracted towards, why can you decide your gender? The typical response from gender ideology and trans activists is that you cannot change the gender assigned to you at birth, but you can change your physical, mental, and social gender, even without undergoing any medical procedures. The bare minimum requirement is that you simply will it with your own mind. But this only brings back the original question. If you can't decide who you biologically love, why can you decide your own biology when it comes to gender? Moreover, why can you decide what other people should perceive you as, especially in terms of physical attraction? You can't. Just as how gays and lesbians cannot suddenly decide they like the opposite sex. Trans activists will claim that the best cure for gender dysphoria is gender affirmative surgery, and that the only way to fight their mental illness is to put them in a body they are comfortable with. But by comparison, why is there basically no talk about wanting to change your own race? The answer to that is quite simple. Outside of physical attraction, if you by any means favor or reject one race for another, then that makes you a racist by definition. As such, rejecting your own gender makes you a sexist, because you feel fundamentally inferior to the other gender, and that is not a good thing. A healthy society is one which understands that men and women complement each other, and that they are nothing without the other. Quite literally too. Going back to the point of gender affirmative surgery, trans activists claim that the treatment is concluded once the surgery is complete. But reality is telling just the opposite. The treatment will never end, because the majority of people will still only acknowledge your gender at birth. Some are willing to address trans people by their preferred pronouns, but accepting the transition in of itself may be a completely different story. Trans activists and transgender people understand this, which is why they are pushed to use force. For the sake of their treatment, they must make other people choose whether to bow down to their worldview or suffer serious consequences. In other words, trans rights include the right to trample on the rights of real men and women. Public restroom incidents and women's sports are prime examples of that. And last but not least, most trans activists believe in two things at the same time. Problem is, they are completely contradicting and conflicting with each other. The first belief is that gender is a social construct. What they mean by that is that societal norms and behavior play a big part in determining a person's gender. For instance, most girls play with dolls and pony plushies, as opposed to most boys. And most boys play with action figures and do rough things on the playground, as opposed to most girls. Gender ideologists intend to gather this kind of behavior data in order to help children with gender dysphoria determine what gender they truly are. And for some reason, it doesn't have to be just between male and female. In this case, perhaps we should be grateful it is simply enough to transition on a mental level, and that no physical surgery is required. To summarize, if gender is a societal construct, then that means gender is determined by society, the group, not the individual. The second belief is that gender is ultimately decided by the individual, and that nobody has the right to tell them otherwise. Not even society and the so-called social construct it has produced throughout history. If you were born as a boy, but then all of a sudden feel like a girl, then nobody has the right to stop you from entering the girls' restroom. Because according to them, questioning another person's sexuality and gender is bigoted. In any case, which one is it? Who has the final saying in the matter? The group or the individual? Trans activists don't ask themselves these questions, and for good reason. Another question I pose is that if gender dysphoria is a disorder, then why is that the one we enable by forcing other people into submission, as opposed to NPD and BIID? If this is new information to you, then you probably have a hard time figuring out which of these two beliefs trans activists ultimately choose over the other. The best way to find out is to tell an activist that you identify as either male or female exclusively, without attaching yourself to man or woman, or whatever fantastical gender which can be found in the so-called spectrum. While humanity has managed to distinguish itself from the rest of the animal kingdom, that is precisely what humans are in the end: animals. Yet, despite our intellectual and technological advancement, we still somehow manage to breed this kind of self-destructive nonsense. It would indeed appear that if something is gained, something else is lost.